The next key issue for Chapter 9 is focused on where agriculture is distributed. In order to do this, we need to understand the difference between different categories of agriculture. We will first take on subsistence agriculture, and then we will move on into commercial agriculture. This first part will focus on subsistence, agriculture that is mainly found in developing countries. We'll be looking at agriculture regions and climate, subsistence agriculture in dry regions, subsistence agriculture in tropical regions, and subsistence agriculture in population concentrations. Take a quick look at figure 9-13. This map is incredibly important as it lays out all of the different types of agriculture in the world. The map spans page 316 and 317 of your textbook. You can see the type of agriculture that's more common in your developing countries in more of the greenish blue colors, and the type of agriculture that is most common in developed countries, mainly your orangey, brown, yellowish colors. Similarities between agriculture and climate are very much connected. For example, if you look at pastoral nomadism, this is going to be very predominant in agriculture in Southwest Asia and North Africa because of its dry climate. Looking at shifting cultivation, on the other hand, that is going to be predominant in sub-Saharan Africa, which happens to have a more tropical climate. You'll also see varying types of agriculture in China. For example, in southeastern China with warm and mid-latitude climates, you're going to see intensive subsistence agriculture and wet rice dominant, whereas in northeastern China, where it's cold and more of a mid-latitude climate, you're going to see intensive subsistence agriculture with wet rice not dominant. Don't panic. I understand that you're not quite familiar with the different categories of agriculture. We'll get into that later. Varying types of agriculture also persists in the United States, again connected to the different climate types. Let's get right into talking about the different types of agriculture prominent in developing countries. We'll talk about intensive subsistence or wet rice dominant first. Intensive subsistence wet rice dominant is most common in large population concentrations of East Asia and South Asia. The term wet rice refers to rice that's planted on dry land in a nursery and then gets moved as seedlings to flooded fields to promote growth. China and India account for nearly 50% of the world's rice production, and more than 90% is produced in East, South, and Southeast Asia. The reason it's called intensive subsistence is because producing large yields of rice is very elaborate and very time consuming. It's also done mostly by hand. The next type of agriculture is intensive subsistence, but not crops that are rice. So this is also known as not wet rice dominant. Climate has much to do with farmers not being able to grow wet rice in different portions of Asia, especially where summer precipitation levels are way too low and winters are way too harsh. Agriculture in the interior of India and northeastern China are devoted to crops that are not wet rice. For example, wheat, barley, and other grains are grown. Again, it is referred to as intense subsistence because cultivating these crops is very labor intensive and in large part is done by hand. Pastoral nomadism is a form of subsistence agriculture based on the herding of domesticated animals in dry climates where planting crops is impossible. Pastoral nomads depend primarily on animals rather than crops for survival. This is common in Saudi Arabia and North Africa. The animals provide milk, and their skins and hair are used for clothing and tents. Their animals are usually not slaughtered, although dead ones may be consumed. To nomads, the size of their herd is both important by measure of power and prestige, and their main security during adverse environmental conditions. Contrary to what many assume, pastoral nomads consume mostly grain rather than meat. Today, many present-day nomads actually raise crops and obtain them by trading animal products. Nomads choose animal species that are able to adapt to particular climates and vegetations. For example, camels are suited to arid climates. Goats, on the other hand, need much more water than camels, but they can survive on any vegetation. Sheep are affected easily by climatic changes, and they're also relatively slow moving. They require more water than camels and goats and are more selective about which plants they will eat. Pastoral nomads make up a very small percentage of agriculture in the world. They also experience greater threats by government especially. Government is known to confine the areas in which nomads may conduct agriculture. In addition, they may also have a preference for land being used for other reasons, either through urbanization or for producing different types of agriculture that are more economically advantageous. Governments may also prefer land for activities such as mining and petroleum industries rather than for agriculture. Next, let's get into shifting cultivation. There are two distinctive features of shifting cultivation. First, farmers clear land for planting by slashing vegetation and burning the debris, and this shifting cultivation is sometimes called slash and burn agriculture. Next, farmers grow crops on a cleared field for only a few years until soil nutrients are depleted, and then they leave it fallow, which means that there's nothing planted for years so that the soil can recover. People who practice shifting cultivation generally live in small villages and grow food on the surrounding land, which the village controls. Land devoted to shifting cultivation is declining in the tropics at a rate of about 75,000 square kilometers, or about 0.2% per year, according to the United Nations. The amount of Earth's surface allocated to tropical rainforests has already been reduced to less than half of its original area. Until recent years, the World Bank actually supported deforestation with loans to finance development schemes that required clearing forests. There has been greater and greater pressure for shifting cultivation in the tropics to be replaced by other types of agriculture, mainly for the purpose of yielding more per land area. Other types of agriculture, however, are said to be much more detrimental for the environment because they may involve using fertilizers and pesticides and clearing fields permanently. They may also damage the soil and cause severe erosion and also upset balanced ecosystems. The world has been paying much attention to agriculture in tropical regions, particularly in the Amazon. And that is because large-scale destruction of the rainforests may also contribute to global warming. For example, when large numbers of trees are cut, their burning and decay release large volumes of carbon dioxide. This gas can build up in the atmosphere, acting like the window glass in a greenhouse to trap solar energy in the atmosphere, resulting in the greenhouse effect. It is important to note, however, that shifting cultivation is intertwined with social, religious, and political customs. A drastic change in the agricultural economy could disrupt other activities in daily life. The last type of agriculture we're going to look at is plantation agriculture. This happens to be an exception because it's actually considered commercial, but this would be the type of commercial farming you would find in a developing country. Most plantations are located in the tropics and subtropics, especially in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. These plantations are situated in developing countries, however, they're often owned or operated by Europeans or North Americans. The crops that are grown there are often sold to developed countries. The most important crops that are grown on plantations include cotton, sugarcane, coffee, rubber, and tobacco. Other crops include cocoa, bananas, coconuts, and palm oil. Until the Civil War, plantations were important in the U.S. South, where the principal crop was cotton, followed by tobacco, and then sugar cane. Slaves were brought from Africa that performed most of the labor until the abolition of slavery and the defeat of the South in the Civil War. After that, plantations declined in the United States and they were subdivided, either sold to individual farmers or worked by tenant farmers. Take a quick look at figure 9-16 located on page 319 of your textbook. Pastoral nomadism is a subsistence agricultural practice where animals are herded across lands too dry to grow crops. As you can see here, you'll see goats, and these goats need more water than camels, but they can survive on any vegetation as mentioned earlier. These are milking goats, and this is the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. Looking at figures 9-17 and 9-18, located on page 320 and 321 of your textbook, we can see shifting cultivation, represented in two different ways. Found in tropical climates where soils are usually low in nutrients, shifting cultivation involves slashing and burning the forest. You can see this present on the left in Mozambique. This happens before planting crops for a few years. This is what it's intended to induce, which is pictured on the right in Côte d'Ivoire. Check out figure 9-19, located on page 322 of your textbook. This map indicates rice production, and you can find that it's much more intense in East Asia and South Asia. We talked about most of the production coming out of China and India. Well, they produce 50% of the world's rice. But it's also important to remember that 90% is produced in East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Fishing is a topic that doesn't quite fit into categories under developed countries or developing countries. It has, however, grown quite drastically since the 1950s. Fishing includes food that's acquired from Earth's waters, and fishing includes the capture of wild fish and other seafood living in those waters. Aquaculture, also known as aquafarming, is where cultivation of seafood happens under controlled conditions. Take a look at figures 9-26 and 9-27, located on page 324 of your textbook. You see fish production on the left and human consumption of fish on the right. Both have increased dramatically. Increases since 1990 are mainly attributed to aquaculture, but this is raising concerns about overfishing, mainly because it is becoming more and more of a threat through industrialization. Developing countries are responsible for 5/6 of this increase. Fish consumption has increased more rapidly than population growth, and during the past half century, per capita consumption of fish has nearly doubled in both developed and developing countries. Still, fish and seafood account for only 1% of all calories consumed by humans. Around 85% of the fish is consumed directly by humans, and the remainder is converted to fish meal, fed to poultry and hogs. Take a look at figure 9-29, located on page 325 of your textbook. As you can see here, China accounts for 1/3 of fish production in the world. The other leading countries are naturally those with ocean boundaries like Chile, Indonesia, and Peru. Fish species in oceans and lakes have declined because of overfishing. This means fish are being captured at a faster rate than they can reproduce. There were hopes in the mid-20th century that increased fish consumption could meet the needs of growing populations. However, the populations of some fish species declined because of overfishing. The UN estimates that 1/4 of fish stocks have been overfished and 1/2 fully exploited, leaving only 1/4 underfished. Overfishing is definitely disrupting the world's ecosystem, but it is very difficult to regulate it.